We have just about made it to halftime. That's right. We are here, NFC West team previews, wrapping up the week with the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, man. You think we would have had some kind of climax or something getting to halftime, some climactic ending. It's the Seahawks. They were bad last year, and now they don't have Russell Wilson. They have Geno Smith and Drew Lock as their quarterback. Who's it going to be? Well, I'll tell you what. One thing I think of when I think of Geno Smith, before I get to the numbers, remember that if you're a Saints fan, and a lot of you watching are Saints fans when you watch these previews, you remember that Monday night game last year? Russell Wilson was out. Weather was kind of nasty. It was October. I think it was misty. It was windy. One of the first plays on offense for Seattle, Geno Smith comes in and throws a 80-something yard bomb to DK Metcalf. Boom, Seattle scores 7-0. You think it's going to be a high-flying game, or maybe the Saints are going to get upset now. They didn't score another touchdown. In fact, they only had 3 points the rest of the way. That says all you need to know about Geno Smith. And then there's Drew Lock coming over from the Denver Broncos. You got to think there's going to be a good chance that he's going to end up, if he doesn't win this role from the get-go, at some point he's going to be the quarterback. Drew Lock, maybe Mr. Mediocre in the NFL. It seems like he's always on teams that are 7-10, 8-9, 6-11, whatever. Is this another one of those teams? Frankly, not to give the spoiler alert too early, but I think they could be way worse than that. I mean, if you look at the numbers from last year, their over-under win total coming into the season is 6. Last year, going in, it was 10. We thought they would be under at 9-8 with Russell Wilson. Well, they finished 7-10. They had the 20th ranked offense in the NFL and the 28th ranked defense, and that's with DK Metcalf. Rashad Penny had a nice comeback and ended up being a pretty good running back towards the end of the season. Their division title, don't even mess with any. You're not going to mess with any of those numbers. I threw them up there because I have to, but you're not going to play any of those numbers. Please don't. You talk about their offense, DK Metcalf signed a long extension. He's going to be with this team for a while. Hey, he to me, he's like A.J. Brown. He's almost as good. At times, he can be dominant and take over games. Rashad Penny, okay. Tyler Lockett is a great receiver to go with him. And I love Tyler Lockett. I love the 1-2 punch of Metcalf and Lockett. And they get a tight end in Noah Fant, who I think is one of the most underrated tight ends in the NFL from Denver Broncos. I thought that was part of a high price to pay. But who's going to get him the ball? Geno? Drew Lock? Are they going to get him the ball? Look, Pete Carroll, I am no fan of Pete Carroll. To me, he is an underachiever. He's one of the deans of NFL coaches going into his 13th season. But we all know Pete Carroll is not that great of a coach. He's been fortunate enough to have some great players throughout his career and has been served by them both in the pro ranks and the collegiate ranks. This defense is not very good. Go to their schedule before we get to the expert. It says it's the 11th toughest in the NFL, but, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, Denver and San Francisco, I mean, that's kind of a setup game. Very funny NFL. You got to play Denver on Monday night at home. Russell Wilson comes back to Seattle in his first game with the Denver Broncos. At San Francisco, one of the best teams in the NFL, I think. This year, we talked about them yesterday. But then you get Atlanta and an improved Detroit team at the Saints and Arizona. To me, if the Seahawks have any chance to go over, they have to win at least 3 of their first 6 games. I don't see it. You go through it. Chargers, Giants, Arizona, Tampa Bay. And so to go even further, if they're going to get to that 6-win mark, they've got to have at least 4 wins by their bye week. Because really, on the back end, I only see 2 potential wins, and that's Carolina and the Jets. And do you want to play for a push? I'm not. I'm not playing for a push. The only play here to me on Seattle is the under. And to me, I'm probably just going to stay away from them altogether. I think there's an excellent chance this team wins 4 or 5 games. And I don't see how they get to 7 wins. You can't play the over on this team. So it's either under or nothing. And you certainly can't play any of the other numbers. But that's why we have an expert here. And we'll have him on here as we move our way towards the second half of our preview schedule. It's the North next week, as in the AFC North. That one should be interesting. Wrapping up the week and moving to our halftime. We're going to have halftime. We're not really going to take a break. So, I mean, we're not going to take the 12 minutes. We're going to jump right into the next division when this is over. But right today, we're finishing up the NFC West with the Seattle Seahawks. Here with Adam Chernoff of Covers.com, our pro football handicapping expert, to let me know how wrong I am. And I'm not sure what he's going to say about this, but I have the first two, we didn't have any opinion really. Kind of on the fence. San Francisco, we love. Seattle, I have an opinion. It's really hard to do this. Anyone who's listened to any of my shows knows what I think about Pete Carroll. I've never been a fan of Pete Carroll's. I think he's highly overrated. Even when they went to the Super Bowl, and he makes the worst call in the history of pro football in the Super Bowl to lose the Super Bowl. But that being said, I mean, I'm not making this pick because I don't like Pete Carroll. I'm making this pick because I don't see how this team could be any good with Geno Smith. I know 6 is a low number. If you look through their schedule, I don't know how they're going to get to 7. I think the best you're hoping to do if you bet the over is to push. I'm not touching Seattle, but if I had to touch them, I think they're going to be under. They might only win 4 games. This team is not good.
It's not good, but we're probably going to see a lot more Drew Lock than Geno Smith to start the season, the way that it's trending. So that probably doesn't change your outlook, though, I'm guessing.
No, it doesn't. I saw what he did with Denver. It doesn't change my mind. Although I love DK Metcalf. I love Noah Fant. I think is an underrated tight end. Rashad Penny's okay. But, you look at their ranks from last year, 20th on offense and 28th on defense in this division is not going to win you any games.
Okay, so I don't have a take on the season-long win total, but what I will say is I think that week to week during the regular season, the Seahawks could be a sneaky over team in terms of betting the over weekly if Drew Lock is starting. And everyone listening to this podcast will probably remember Jameis Winston in 2019, the 33 touchdown, 33 interception. You recall the performance, don't you?
Very much so. Okay. He was our opponent, the Saints' opponent for 2 games.
Here's what's interesting about it is when you look at some of the stats, Drew Lock and Jameis Winston that season have a lot in common in terms of how aggressive they are pushing the ball downfield, how far downfield they're willing to throw the football on an average target basis. Everything about how they play is very similar. Now, the similarities between Seattle and Tampa Bay that year was the Bucs had Evan and Godwin, so you had 2 elite wide receivers.
Right.
Seattle has Metcalf and Lockett, so 2 elite wide receivers. Both guys very good at catching the ball downfield, but the Buccaneers were always playing from behind that entire season, which forced Jameis into like the aggressive Jameis Winston that was just firing the ball downfield at will.
Right.
That's kind of who Drew Lock is. And so the Seahawks average total week to week is the lowest in the NFL. Last season, they ran the fewest plays per game by about 3.5 plays to the second least in the NFL. So if we get this version of Drew Lock that's just firing the ball downfield to 2 very good wide receivers, they should be priced a lot higher than they are to start the season at least. So if we get Drew Lock, and we go into the season, we still see them in the low 40s, 41, 42 for their totals. I'm just going to be betting the overs because I think that it has to be higher because of what Drew Lock brings to the team. So that's my take on Seattle. There's no season-long bets, but I think it could be a really sneaky week-to-week team.
And if it's not Drew Lock, what comes to mind when I think of Geno Smith? Not at his Jets days. But I'm thinking, and I didn't mean that to rub it in. Sorry, Adam. I know that's probably a sore subject there. But what I think of is I think of last year in a Monday night game, just an awful football game where the Saints were playing at Seattle. It was kind of a nasty kind of night. I believe it was in early October. And it was one of the first plays of the game. See, it was one of Seattle's first plays of the game. Geno Smith hits DK Metcalf for like an 85-yard bomb. They take a 7-0 lead, and then they only score a field goal after that. The Saints end up winning the game 13-10, and it was just an ugly game, and that's kind of what I think of when I think of Geno Smith.
Yeah, no, with Geno, it's trouble. I wouldn't share the same sentiment or angle with Geno because you don't get that constant lack of any sort of reasonable decision making when throwing the football. With Locke, he doesn't care. He just fires it downfield. And so it's very different in that regard. If it's Geno, don't look at it. If it's Drew Lock, though, keep an eye out because we're going to get some big plays, but we're also going to get some just mind-numbing mistakes that set teams up for a short field against a very weak defense here in Seattle.
Throughout his collegiate and pro career, Drew Lock has been on a lot of mediocre football teams, hasn't he?
Yeah, mediocre QB.
It's being nice.
That's kind of how it works.
There you go. Adam Chernoff, thank you very much. We made it to the halfway point. We'll talk to you next week when we do the AFC North. Very interesting division.
Very interesting.
And I think we'll have some opinions there. Talk to you then.
Thanks, Jim.